So we'll just get started here in a couple of minutes. I know Trisha's tied up for a bit, so I'm going to run the show today. At least until she's comes back. All right, starting to fill in. Welcome, everybody. All right. Oh, there's Dave Hardy. Good. Awesome. Okay, well, let's get started. And then as people trickle in, we'll just let them in. So we're going to start off with our update from Chris Gray. So just our federal lobbying update and anything exciting in Ottawa. So Chris, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Scott. It's always exciting, interesting things going on here in Ottawa. Parliament is coming back on Monday, and shortly thereafter, we're expecting the Finance Committee to table its pre-budget report, which Scott, of course, you appeared before the committee just in last fall, so or just last December. We're obviously hopeful that and working with committee members to make sure that our recommendations are included in the report that the Finance Committee or the Finance Minister will then consider when making the budget, which we are still anticipating coming in approximately late March, early April timeframe. But of course, there's always a potential for an election on the horizon, which I do think we will be going to the polls at some point in 2021. I know that Tricia took the time to post a lot of the programs that are available for you to participate in and potentially tap into. I know she posted that to LinkedIn. And also, we are still waiting, and I've been working with Scott and the government on a possible new program around the highly affected sectors, so that I'm promised that details are coming very soon. I've been told that for about 2 weeks now, but obviously once any details come of that, I will relay that to you as soon as possible. Moving forward, we continue to meet with and will be meeting with members of Parliament to support FIC's budget requests, and we'll be meeting with more members on the Health Committee and moving broader than that on the overall industry and how it's going, etc. I've been helping some members on the side as well with certain issues, and of course I'm happy to do that where needed, or if you'd like some extra help in connecting with certain government officials or folks, happy to do that. And I know Dino will give an update on what's going on in Manitoba, but we were happy to help get that news released out in Manitoba as well, and see it had some impact as well. So that's a brief update from me, and I'll turn it back to you, Scott.
Okay, great, thank you. So another just update to follow up from our last meeting. We are putting together the mechanics for our hashtag Hire a Coach campaign. So we will have something to send out next week for everybody's review, and then we hope to finalize that. The board did pass a motion to offer the athletes who provide a quote, a donation to the charity of their choice, or they can donate their time to FIC. So we're just in the final stages of putting that together. In terms of a provincial update, we want to keep it very brief today because we do have a keynote presentation that we're all very excited about. And I know that there's lots of moving parts in each province. We are finalizing the funds that will be available for each province in terms of seed money to be able to, do specific endeavors, whether that's lobby specific or website or create videos or whatnot. So look for that in the coming weeks. Want to turn it over to Mo Hagan to just briefly talk about the National Health and Fitness Winter Week.
Great, thank you, and good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I'll make it very brief. I'm here on behalf of Tricia and Natalie and the rest of the National Health and Fitness Week and National Health and Fitness Day Task Force, and wanted just to let you know that we have created, in collaboration between FIC and ChemFit Pro, a really fun and inclusive 7-day program that is just something that all Canadians can participate in. It's really to encourage embracing winter by doing 150 minutes of accumulated exercise over the period of 7 days to promote being physically active outdoors, embracing winter and winter week. And we will put in the chat box the link so you can find the 7-day program that is ready to go. We're going to be promoting it, and it's already being promoted on the FIC website. And this program will be accompanied by daily social media messaging, both by the FIC and by ChemFit Pro. And we really encourage all of you to use this to engage not only your members to keep them physically active, but to connect with them, and also could be a really fun, engaging challenge for even your staff, whether they're actively working right now, but helping them to stay active as well. And I think I'll leave it at that unless, Tricia, you have anything to add. I see you've now here with us. I'll just respect the time, but everything you need to know will be in the links and on the website, so you can grab it all from there.
Yeah, thank you, Mo. The 7-day workout is posted on our website. It is in the chat box here for everybody. And also we were looking at doing that, a type of a challenge to maybe have your trainers or people in your business to challenge each other to see if they can do these 7 days of what the activities are, and then posting about them using the appropriate hashtags, which are also listed in the PDF. So really trying to engage and bring up the fact that fitness is important and making sure that we are able to showcase that in a positive way, especially during a time where it seems to be a little bit of an issue in many provinces. So just wanted to encourage everyone to share that and also participate themselves as well as everybody in their circle.
Great. I know from a provincial standpoint, due to our keynote today, we don't want to go through province by province, but Dino, could you speak to the events that unfolded in your province this week? I know we're all dying to know the outcome, with the media interviews, et cetera. So. And you're muted if you're talking.
Okay, sorry. We're good? Okay, so I'm sure you guys all know about the bizarre events this past week about how they left their own gyms open in the civic buildings. Civic politicians had access to facilities as well as municipal employees. Obviously, police, fire, paramedics did, but on top of that, just regular city employees and stuff had access to gyms right through Code Red. So right through our hardest hit times when we had like high mortality, high caseload, high test positivity. These spaces were open, and they were open with less restrictions than we were open with during the previous 6 months of being open between June and November. So we saw that as an opportunity to release a press release. I think it was shared somewhere. I think, I'm not sure if it was emailed out to all you guys, but I sent it to all our members here in Manitoba. We got it out to the media, and I did 6 interviews between yesterday and the day before. Lots of positive feedback on the interviews, obviously. The public definitely feels the same way. They see there's a double standard, obviously. The city went and closed those facilities as like a knee-jerk reaction, stating that it was just because of poor communication, which I just chuckled because they were caught, right? Had they not been caught, they'd still be open right now, and they'd still be going to these facilities. So we used it as kind of evidence that our facilities can operate safely. They were able to do it, so obviously we should be able to do it as well. That was the direction we took in my interviews, and we just demanded some communication with the government. Obviously, here we have a conservative government, and they're really not open to talking. It's been 11 months we've been trying. I did get an email late last night from Wab Kanu, who is the NDP leader here, and he supported us. He said he's raised many of these concerns in discussion already with them, and he's going to continue to push them on it. And he did this at 11 o'clock last night, which I thought was commendable, because nobody has ever reached out from the Conservative Party to acknowledge anything, despite me talking to every single minister's office on the phone. I also received emails from the Liberal MLAs in the area. So same thing, support, thank you for doing this. We believe in your cause. We see the value in your service. Obviously, they see a value in your industry as well if they're leaving these things open. So I'm expecting I should get some type of reply today. But after this meeting, I'll be calling all of the ministers in order and just confirming with their secretaries that they acknowledge our media release and our appearances on TV, and just take it from there. Basically, they can't ignore us anymore, and I'll line up some more interviews if I have to. But we'll just keep pushing until we do get a reply, because the public is becoming more and more aware of this value that we have. And I think now we can't let up. We just got to keep hitting them with everything. I'm just going to quickly wrap up, but I do want to also acknowledge that there's a lot of tension brewing here in terms of facilities. I'm seeing in Ontario that there's some lawsuits being started. Here in Manitoba, there's a group that is moving that way, which is I'm very much against, because I think when thinking about any type of legal action, one, it's going to cut any chance of communication with government or with the public health. And long-term, we want a relationship with public health. So we're trying to be medicine. We're trying to be part of public health. So as soon as we start approaching that legal aspect, it's going to cut all chance of more prosperous and healthy future for everyone. So I just encourage everyone to try to avoid going down that road. But I know everyone's desperate here, and both the restaurant and fitness industry are looking that way. But yeah, that's my update.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, without further ado, want to introduce our keynote speaker today. So David Hardy, many of you know him. For those new to the association, Dave is the past president of Fitness Industry Council of Canada, founded way back when, 2006. He's a wealth of knowledge and experience in our industry. And so today, Dave's going to be talking about renegotiating your lease. And I think Dave has negotiated, probably safe to say, hundreds of leases in his career. So a well-versed expert in the field. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Dave Hardy.
Well, hi, everybody. I've got two screens going here, so I'm going to try to share my screen and hope that this works. So let's just give this a try. And there, does everyone see this? Working with landlords during COVID? Wow, technology.
Yes, yes.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. And it's interesting, Scott. I'm not sure I'm necessarily going to give you exactly that. You know, I was asked to do a presentation on how to work strategies to work with landlords during the pandemic. And I'll tell you a little bit about the success we've had so far in terms of renegotiating the leases. And try to give a relatively quick overview. Interesting, when you talk about the number of leases, I was thinking about that myself. I think I've reviewed personally a couple hundred lease documents in my career, but I know we've signed 1,500 of them total. And so I have a pretty good sense of what landlords are and aren't doing. And I'm getting a sense not only from Canada, but the US, which I think might add some more color to this. And then, for those of you that I don't know, and I think I know everybody, I've been in the business somewhat by accident now for almost 30 years. I got into the Club Fit years and years ago, and been involved with World Health, opened a spin studio, involved with Orange Theory. So I think I have a pretty good sense of this. And also before that was a business broker and helping other people sell their businesses, which I think gave me some good insight into doing this. What I want to do today is talk a little bit about the landscape of what's happening in Canada. And I think that will help give you some insight into how to deal with landlords, because I think that the idea of being able to go to your landlords and renegotiate leases, I don't think that's going to be as easy to do. I think what you need to do now is figure out how to make sure that you're in business so we all come out of this pandemic together. There's a whole bunch of pressure on businesses right now. They're talking about average small businesses at 29% of year-over-year sales when you talk about all the closures, especially companies like ours, which are considered non-essential businesses. We've really been hit hard. They were saying before 1 in 7 small businesses are at risk of closing. I read something just the other day, it's upwards of 30 or 40% now. In terms of Orange Theory in Canada, the very top number in white will show you how many we have open. Today, we have 8 of 110 locations open across Canada. We have a few in BC, a few in Saskatchewan, and then for the most part, it's been pretty tough. A few in Ontario. So, what are the landlord realities? The landlords are also they're acutely aware of this, and so. I'm involved in a couple of business groups that actually have landlords in my group. And one of the things that they're saying to me is, landlords aren't being hit that hard. A lot of them are collecting 90 or 95% of their rent. If you think about a shopping center, in a shopping center, they'll have a Safeway and they'll have all these essential businesses that typically are big spaces. A lot of the non-essential businesses are often smaller spaces. Even restaurants are still able to stay open by doing takeout, and restaurants have pivoted relatively well with that. But when you talk to the big landlords, they're still collecting north of 90% of their revenue before. And when they think about a non-performing or a non-essential business like the fitness industry, big box gyms are a little different. But if you take a look at the smaller clubs or the smaller studios, they kind of think about this as if someone leaves, there's probably going to be someone else to come in. And the best analogy was one guy explaining a nail salon. In a nail salon, there's a bunch of employees. The nail salon owner goes out of business. Well, that assistant manager who's been there for 3 years saving money to open his or her own nail salon, they will be my next tenant. And so there's opportunities that way, and they'll probably pay the back rent because they now don't have to pay for the tenant allowance and all the other costs to get in there. Government subsidies are going to end in 2021. And you would think landlords are expected to be reasonable and deal with them. The one thing that landlords are probably a little more concerned about is their ability to go after guarantees, especially with small business owners, because a lot of them have had to put their personal finances into these businesses to help them survive. I'm not going to go through the subsidies, but I can tell you the subsidies in Canada have been, compared to the US, have been much better rolled out. I think that, although a lot of us have felt a lot of pain in terms of our businesses being closed down, in the US, we have trainers living out of their cars because it's just such a different environment down there when they close down markets. One of the things that I thought was the most important article was one that came out from the CEO, David McKay of the Royal Bank. And his belief is that if we can get sort of this 4 to 4.5 million high-risk Canadians vaccinated, which he thought was 100 days, and that was as of January 11th. That was before Pfizer announced their 1-month delay. He thought that in about 100 days, we would get the high-risk people. And if you take a look at COVID deaths, what's the number? 75 or 80% of them are in that over 75-year-old range. A lot of them are in long-term care. If we can get that part of the economy under control, it's going to make things a lot different. And I can tell you, operating in the U.S., in some markets in the U.S., you wouldn't even know there's a pandemic. The restaurants are full. There's a new gym that opened up in Phoenix called Mountainside, and it was so full they had overflow parking. People were wearing masks, but people were getting back. They're coming back quickly. So there's a report that just came out from Club Intel. Stephen Thratt, who some of you may have known, just passed away earlier this month, which is very sad. We'd used him in our company to do some consulting, but Mark Williamson, who's still running the company, has given some updates. And really, essentially, what they've sort of talked about is, what do we expect to see happen come out after this pandemic is over? And essentially, there's a lot of people that have not or are less likely to return to their facilities. Millennials are maybe a little more likely to go back. And then there's been a lot more go online. You've seen certainly Peloton shares go to $42 billion, which if anyone works that out, that's $18,400 per member at $500 a year. So I don't know what the payback on that is, but as long as every member stays 36 years, they're in good shape. But I mean, the valuations on some of these are crazy, but there's been definitely a movement that is going to, I believe, see a drop in demand for our product somewhat. But there's also going to be a corresponding drop in demand, in supply, pardon me. There will be less gyms that will be out there. There will be less studios. I think there will be a net gain at the end of it. But if you talk to respondents today, and I don't know if doing surveys today is such a great thing too, because it's really easy to say I'm not going to go back to my gym or I'm going to work out at home. But we all know that we all had those treadmills or exercise bikes in the laundry rooms of our houses years ago, and the only thing they were good for was hanging your clothes on because no one used them. One of the things that people get from our gyms is community, and people after this pandemic are going to be seeking community more and more, just because everyone's been so lonely, pent up with the lockdowns. Again, in terms of the study from Club Intel, there's definitely going to be reluctance to go back to the gyms until the pandemic is more under control. But I do believe that the narrative will change a lot. I think even having Biden come in the US, there's going to be a lot more. I watched Fauci's press release yesterday or conference yesterday. I have a lot more confidence in the information coming out today, whereas I think there was an awful lot of confusion before, and I think that will help give confidence to our industry. So in terms of what did we do at Orange Theory with our landlords and our approach? Well, first of all, we made sure that we got as much money in programs as possible. 97% of our 100 plus studios applied for and received SECRA. The ones that didn't get it, the landlords didn't want to go through the hassle and gave the corresponding rent reductions. Make sure you're not just focusing on your four walls. We've launched our own platform. If you have to have some digital offering, do it. We've also launched an outdoor 45 program or an outdoor boot camp program. And then, wherever possible, you've learned how to operate your businesses more efficiently. Make sure you carry that in afterwards. If you had 3 people on the front desk and you now figure out how to do it with one, maybe using more technology, you make those investments, or you figure out how to do that go forward, because it's going to be a bit of a slow recovery. In terms of landlords, the landlords themselves, and I said on one hand, non-essential businesses there's opportunities for them to fill them back in, but landlords are essentially reluctant to terminate leases because of social media or potential implications. We've talked to a couple landlords where our franchisees are behind in rent, and they do not want to terminate leases, partly because they're worried about, one, how it will look publicly, and 2, because courts are likely to be very sympathetic to tenants. The other part that landlords also are recognizing, or certainly need to be educated on, is that when things do open up again, we're not going to immediately have 100% of our members back. Some of the predictions from Club Intel is that we're going to be likely as an industry at 40 to 50% of our revenue. And then just like a pre-sale, we're going to have to rebuild. So we're going to continue to be losing money. But once things do lift and the restrictions are gone, I think you're going to watch, landlords may not be as sympathetic to wait for rents as they are during the pandemic. So, I'm encouraging everyone to figure out working capital options now rather than later. In terms of doing this is a slide we had with our franchisees. There's sort of 4 buckets of finding money for landlords. Government aid, and if you haven't applied for everything, including the loans, make sure you do it. Certainly, if you apply for the loans and you don't need it, give them back. It's easier to do that later than now. In terms of landlords, working with them, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, how to work with your landlords, going for abatements or deferrals, seeing if you can do percentage rent. I have not heard, in the States, I've heard more of it, because there are, like in Texas, for example, we have some of our groups where the landlords have just taken a 50% cut in rent for 12 months. And I've heard those stories out of the States, and there's leasing groups that will help you do that. I haven't heard those same stories in Canada. Landlords are doing some deferrals, but they are not cutting rents. It's the same thing as well. Well, I guess that's the expectation is I don't think there's going to be as much of that in Canada. In terms of financing, make sure you go back to your banks and get them to do deferrals on your principal, even your leasing companies. And then for those of you that have a business that was good before the pandemic, go look for investors. If you have to it's better to own 75% of something than 100% of nothing. If you have to take someone and bring in a partner for 25% to provide that working capital boost for you, I would recommend you do it now. It takes some time to do it. Don't do it when you're getting a termination letter from your landlord. I think there's an awful lot of people, and we're seeing private equity interest in our business like never before. Private equity investors are smart. They know this thing is going to end one day, and they have money to deploy. And so they're making investments that they know that when this comes out, it was a good business before, it will be a good business again. So figure out ways to get investors in to help with your payments, in particular to your landlords so you're still in business. This is one of the most interesting slides I've seen, which talks about how much government support has been given from COVID. So if you take a look at Canada, we've spent about 16% of our GDP, our gross domestic product, on COVID support. The US has spent 13%. Now, if Joe Biden's new $2 trillion package goes through, that 14% will change to 24%. I don't think they're going to get all 2 trillion. I think it's going to be closer to 1, but still that's going to go to 19%, and they'll be one of the highest groups in terms of the amount of money they've spent. I guess my point is, in Canada, we have spent it well, and I think it's been targeted. In the US, it's kind of all over the place. But governments have spent a lot of money on this, and anyone thinking that Canada hasn't done their fair share, Canada has spent more than almost anybody in terms of supporting businesses and employees and staff. And so how much more are they going to be prepared to do? I guess on one hand, you could say they've done a lot, maybe they'll keep spending, but there's going to be pressure not to do too much. So here are my recommendations. I kind of was asked, what are your recommendations in terms of dealing with landlords? First, be proactive. Make sure you call them before you miss any payments, and call often. Ultimately, a landlord is either going to like you or they're not going to like you, and they're going to be much more inclined to work with you if they like you. And if you have a financial plan, share the plan with them. If you're working on investors, share that you're working with them on investors. Be open. Make sure you have your financial statements done, and you can share that. Don't expect your landlord to be your investor. Your landlords have other options. They can take that space and release it. If you end up leaving, and it's a spin studio, for example, there's likely to be other people looking to open spin studios one day. And if they can walk in and have them all fully outfitted, it's going to be a lot easier to do that. They may also be your bank. If they have more confidence, they're going to be repaid. And if they have a good plan and you share financial information with them, they're more likely to do it. Make sure you also can show your landlords you've exhausted all forms of government support. They're not going to be happy to find out you're asking them to support you, but you haven't actually done everything you can to get money from the programs that are available. On a positive note, it's going to be a tough leasing environment when this is over. As I said earlier, the landlords have not been terminating a lot of the leases because it's a difficult environment. But when they do have an opportunity to it, they're also going to see a whole bunch of space come available, I believe. And landlords don't want to pay tenant allowance, or they don't want to pay leasing agents or commissions or tenant improvement allowances if they don't have to. So on that, they're going to want to work with tenants they like and trust, and your key to success is to be that tenant. Now, this is different than the US, where in Canada, there are many of the Canadian landlords are REITs and large national landlords. At the end of the day, their property managers are going to be under significant pressure to collect rents. We had one property manager that was literally calling us as the franchisor every 3 days because they were told they had to get 100% rents. And this was April and May. If you share information with them, if you're calling them first, if you're being a great communicator, then they can say, well, hey, I've got this tenant calling me and here's their business plan. You'll make them look good in front of their superiors, and then they're going to be more inclined to work with you. So in summary, there's going to be a drop in demand and a drop in supply for fitness. My hope is that the drop in supply exceeds the drop in demand. That's what I'm hoping for. Many clubs are going to open at that 50, 60% of pre-COVID revenue, and they're going to need working capital to build. I think there's going to be more closures in our industry and in other industries, especially non-essentials, and landlords may become a little more cooperative. In terms of COVID relief, it ends in June of 2021. Don't expect it to continue. Don't bank on it continuing. Make sure if you need additional working capital, have your business plan now and figure that out. I personally believe, and we've just seen this in Alberta where they didn't lift the restrictions. I personally believe that that 100-day mark that came out from the Royal Bank, that's what politicians are looking for. They do not want to open this thing up and have more, the death counts continue. If they can get the death counts under control, or the number of people dying, then they can start opening up the economy again, and that's probably a couple months away. So we may have rolling opens and closures, but until they get that under control, which means this vaccine, I think we still have a little time to go. Landlords will accept rent deferrals if you're proposing it to them and they have a program. But once restrictions are lifted, they're going to be more inclined, or if they haven't worked something out with you and if they don't have confidence, to start defaults. And as I said, I've already talked about the government loan programs. Don't expect your landlord to be your bank. And I guess my favorite saying, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. I'm hoping there's going to be more government support, but don't plan on it, and don't get yourself in that position. So I hope that was I told Scott it would be a relatively quick summary of all the information. What I didn't tell you is, what are the techniques to go to the landlords and renegotiate your rent? And that's what you started with, Scott. It's probably not the time to do it. Landlords, when they buy these buildings, right now landlords are buying buildings at sort of 4 and 5 and 6 caps. There's not they have mortgages on that. A lot of landlords that I've talked to really got hit hard with the 25% they had to put in the first 3 or 4 or 5 months. And you always think of landlords as being, oh wow, they've got so much money, but these are also the same landlords that are REITs that are paying people that have expectations to make payments out to people. So they're crying the blues as well. And I'm not sure this is necessarily the time to go to them and figure out how to renegotiate your rent. I think it's more the time to figure out how to work with them so they don't shut you down. Scott, I hope that helped, and I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, that was very good, Dave. Thank you so much. Before we open it up to questions, I just want to let everybody know as well that today's session has been sponsored by CanFit Pro, and they're our preferred education provider. And they will be providing education, training, and events and career support for fitness professionals and businesses across Canada. And we look forward to continuing to grow our partnership in the months and years ahead. I'll also say this is the first of a series of sessions. One of the things we're going to be doing is adding, value to the membership. We talked today about working with landlords. We're going to be talking about strategy. We're going to be talking about sales, human resources. So there'll be a real wealth of business related concepts in these meetings on a monthly basis. So Dave, I thought the presentation was great. I do have some questions myself, but we can open it up to the floor for any Q&A. Well, I'll start. You talked about private equity really looking at our space, and I've read and heard that there's quite a bit of capital sitting on the sidelines right now with private equity group and private equity groups. For those who are single operators, is that a potential source? And if not, how would a single operator be inclined to attract investors into their business as you recommended?
Well, and that's just it. In terms of private equity groups, one of the things that they need is scale and size. So whether they invest in $1 million business or $100 million business, they're probably spending the same amount of time. And so single operators, we've seen single operators in our groups in the States where they've put together 10 studios and they've gone out as a group and tried to market them as a group. And that's all. It's the same thing you sometimes see when a whole bunch of neighbors get together on a busy street and try to market their houses together. It's all good until one guy has a holdout and says, "I know everyone else is getting 300 grand, but I want 400 grand." It's been in our case, it has not been successful. It's typically someone rolls up all the clubs or the studios and then they offer them out in the private equity package as a group. So I guess my point is, if you're a small independent or if you're a single operator, it's pretty hard to attract private equity. You won't see most private equity investments much under 10 or 20 million dollars. And in that case, they're probably taking a look at buying, a third to 75% of your business. So that, essentially, puts the values of your companies having to be in that, 20 to 50 million dollar range to even attract them. So I don't know if that helps, but the private equity harder, but there are still an awful lot of people with, anemic interest rates. If you have money in a savings account in the bank today, you're getting less than 1%, 0.1% possibly. And so if you can make a good business case to someone, invest in my business, I'll give you 25% of it. And not only that, I'll guarantee it by giving you you're not just getting 25% of the equity, but you're also getting a loan sort of subordinated to the bank loan. And there's ways to set that up. You're more likely to find private equity that way in terms of friends, family, to invest in your business. And when I was making those comments on the phone, those are probably the ones that I think are more applicable for our industry.
Yeah, and I've heard even some people, single operators speaking to their own members, their own customers, because there's often business investors in that group of people as well. We have a question in the chat from Mike Dew. How much leverage do you think landlords have to get back rent deferrals, or is there a chance they'll forgive it knowing you can't repay?
I actually think there is a chance that they will forgive it. If you kick the can down the road a little bit, you may be able to get them to amortize it out over the balance of the term. You may be able to, if rents come down in value. So in other words, if it was a $40 or $30 a foot square space, and now similar spaces in the center are leasing at $20 or $25, you may be able to make a case to continue to pay the rent you're paying, but for them to forego it. I think if you can do everything you can to kind of kick it down the road a little bit, but keep a good relationship with your landlords, I think that's way better than I wouldn't be asking today for the forgiveness. I would wait till your business comes back and then see what happens to the market.
Great. Karen asks, will a copy of this presentation be made available? We have recorded this meeting, and the recording of the meeting will be made available. And
I just sent the presentation out to everyone in Dropbox.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Don't mind the few typos that I only noticed when I was presenting it.
Any other questions or comments from anybody?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, this might have been covered. I cut out for a bit there, but when approaching a landlord, I've found that, well, this will be a statement and a question. I found preemptively approaching the landlord saying, I can't pay, can we work out a deal? It worked for me in the first lockdown, but they also got subsidized by the government. So I found that was a little bit easier. Now this time around, we're getting a subsidy directly to us. So it's kind of like a two-part question. What would be a reasonable amount to negotiate, like percentage-wise, with the landlord? And when I say landlord, like my landlord owns like 1,000 different units, like it's a multi-million-dollar corporation. So I'm not negotiating with one person. I'm negotiating with a company that probably has many people that can't pay. So I feel like if I negotiate for an amount and say I can pay it, they're more likely to accept because I'm actually willing to pay. So that's the first part. And then the second part is, do I need to disclose, let's say I get 90% rent subsidy because of lockdown, and I want to propose, let's say, paying 80 or 75% so I can take the rest and pay the hydro, let's say. So two questions. What's an appropriate percentage to ask, knowing that I will pay it and I'll pay it now? And then do I need to disclose what I actually get?
Well, so landlords aren't stupid. They've got accountants who understand the government subsidy programs better than you do. And so that's where I think you kind of have to have a full plan. If you're going to go to them, have a full plan and show them, notwithstanding we're getting 90% from the government, I'm still losing $20,000 or $15,000 a month. Can we defer some of that? Because otherwise I just can't keep operating. And that's a better way to deal with it than a percentage. I know I'm getting 90% from the government for rent. I'm going to give you guys 70% of it. I need to use that other 20% so I can keep my doors open, or I won't be here at the end of it when it's time to reopen. And again, if you ask for a deferral, then I think down the road you may be able to kick it off and get it as a complete abatement. So far, as I said, I just haven't seen much success getting abatements in Canada. There's been a few, not none. Of our 110 stores, you know, a handful, 3 or 4 landlords have given abatements. The vast majority of them not.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's the time to talk about it now. I think you're better off, you know, getting that money, keeping the doors open, and working on something with them so you can push it down the road a little bit. Because I think there will be, there's pressure on 2 ends. There's pressure on construction costs, so it's more expensive for landlords to build properties. But I think there's going to be pressure on rents.
Yeah, makes sense.
When you really go back to looking at how Planet Fitness grew, you know, 2008, 2009, that's when Planet Fitness exploded. That's because rents dropped to under $10 a foot, which was their mantra. They would only, when they started out, the only way they'd open a Planet Fitness is rents had to be under $10 a square foot.
Wow. I dream of $10 a square foot.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the group? What about businesses that don't qualify for rent subsidy because they launched past March 2020?
We have a few of those as well, and it's not very much fun. Landlords, again, they're almost know that you're in that same pickle. So, you know, I would be, again, very forward. Here's how much it's costing us to open and to operate. And in those cases, some of them may, you know, we've seen a couple of instances where the landlords, I wouldn't call this a deferral, they've just pushed back the start dates of the leases, recognizing that you can't even operate. So you've done everything you can. You've just been put in a terrible, you've been terribly unlucky. And again, landlords now, they've already paid their tenant allowance. They paid commissions to someone to do it. They were expecting to get a return. If you close down, then they're going to, you know, certainly nothing's going to happen immediately. But it doesn't mean that as a tenant, you won't have to still figure out a way to come up with some additional working capital to help out and to keep the business open. Landlords aren't going to, you know, completely cover it, but they may allow you to push your start date.
Almost like a redo.
Almost like a redo. And we've had a number of those where we have been able to push the start dates. And we had a number of locations in Canada that were expected to open this year that we went to the landlords after COVID started and pushed our launch dates. In hindsight, I wish we'd even pushed them further, but you know, we got what we could get.
I see we have somebody who's on the phone here who has their hand up for a question.
Hey, Trisha. It's Emily from Crush Camp. Hey, Dave, I have 2 questions for you. The first is, have you had to terminate any leases this year? And how has that kind of panned out? I know earlier you said you expect the courts to be sympathetic with tenants, but I'm curious if you can elaborate on that a little bit more. My second is slightly unrelated to COVID, but still with dealing with landlords. In one of our locations, we're in the base level of the condo building, and we've had noise complaints. And we're operating within the bylaw in terms of decibel requirements, but it still becomes problematic with the landlord just because it's problematic with the tenant. We're fully soundproof, so he did everything by the book, but as you know, there can still be issues with reverberation. So I'm just curious if you have any advice or experience with that.
Well, let me start with the first one. Have any of our leases been terminated? We did have one lease that was terminated in Toronto, but it was terminated when there was a no termination clause. So we're now in the midst of litigation on that one. And so, you know, landlords, and that was a very unsophisticated landlord who didn't have good advice. Otherwise, any of the big landlords that we've been working with, they are very, as I said, very reticent to terminate. And even from, you know, as a franchisor, no one in our system has been terminated either. So, but you know, everyone's working with us. In terms of condo noise complaints, you know, we ended up with the True Ride Spin Studio concept because they had a noise problem with their neighbor, and that's how we ended up buying the business. So I'm familiar with it. And you know, in Club Fit, we had noise issues with one tenant. I can tell you, we built a location, an Orange Theory location in Toronto. It's called Bloor West. We actually built a club within a club. It was a 3,000 square foot space, and we built an entire ceiling and walls with 6 inches of air gap between them. Cost us $75,000 just to build the interior shell before we built the studio, because there was $1 million studios above it. And it's a great location. Can you go back and retrofit it afterwards? Typically not, but I tell you, it is the noise complaints. And I guess if you kind of imagine, if you're the poor guy waking up at 5 a.m. to the spin class every morning, you probably, or whatever class it was, you probably wouldn't be very happy. And eventually, what we've seen is either they figure a way to squeeze you out, or they figure a way to buy you out, because it's very difficult to retrofit afterwards. As a matter of fact, almost impossible, because what ends up happening, the pipes in the buildings, the sound reverberates up on the pipes. If you don't have those built properly, where you have breaks and seals in them with rubber, it's almost impossible to do it afterwards.
Great. I don't think we have any other questions in the chat. Well, Dave, thank you very much. Great presentation, lots of great information there. If somebody wanted to reach out with you directly, how would they do so?
Email is the best. Just dhardy@orangetheoryfitness.ca.
Great. Okay, well, Tricia, do we have anything else we want to talk about? We do have some time left.
If I can add one thing, and I might just pass it over to Blake, because I know he was talking with me about it. I know there's a lot of concern about the closures, and just Dino listening to what happened with the government keeping theirs open. There's going to be more and more of a push to push back on the industry and try to get our clubs open at all costs. And I think as an industry association, it's probably a good forum to maybe chat a little bit about that. I'd be interested in hearing the comments.
Yeah, Dave, I'll just jump on top of that. I think the elephant in the room is there's a lot of desperation now, I think, with many operators, whereby we, a lot of people are kind of at the end of the ropes, and in some provinces, most provinces that are not allowed to be open, there's no definitive timeline, or there's very unclear messaging from the governments with respect to reopening. So, and Scott, maybe you want to speak a little bit to, because I think there's going to be more and more of a demand on Fitness Industry Canada to take more of a drastic approach to, to forcing government's hand, and I'm not sure if that's going to prove successful or not. And if we've got 10 minutes left, it might be prudent to talk about maybe what the approach is, which is, let's see where we can get with certain governments that are talking to us, and potentially then, if we're not able to get anywhere in over the course of the next few weeks, in terms of clarity, maybe there's some different measures we can put in place. But I think we're gonna start to see some real parties going rogue unless we can all get together and have a more consolidated approach to this.
Yeah, I think it is a balancing game. We have to show our members that we're doing something, but that something is often in the back channels, kind of behind the curtain, so to speak. So I just know, I'll use Alberta as an example. The restrictions initially were supposed to expire or be lifted as of yesterday. Nothing has been announced. There is no date. So we have a lot of studio owners, a lot of gym owners in Alberta that are mad, and there's a high state of anxiety. We have seen people sue the province. There's been rogue operators who've generated media attention that make the rest of the industry look foolish. So we got to minimize that. We got to contain that. And then we have a meeting on Monday that we finally have a seat at the table to help, craft the guidelines. So, we don't want to do anything now because it would probably alienate that meeting. but how long do we wait before we get that public sentiment? You know, I know Jason Kenney did a release a week ago, and every comment in the chat was, what about gyms? What about sports? What about gyms? So I do feel public sentiment is starting to shift, but there is a real risk that if we are too aggressive and too public too soon, that it could completely derail any negotiations with the governments. Winnipeg's a good example. Dino, you know, and I know Stephanie's on the call too, maybe some other folks from Manitoba. You know, it's been landing on deaf ears forever. We did a press release to hold them accountable for basically a second set of standards, and oh, now all of a sudden they want to talk. So, you know, it is a balancing act for sure, but we do need to make sure that we consider, are we going to undermine ourselves if we are too aggressive too soon? I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions about that, but.
I'll just comment, Scott. I think that's the right approach, and we've got to exhaust all efforts first. And you know, as we've kind of said, if we can get 1 or 2 provinces to take a real progressive and put a real plan, a transparent plan in place, I think that that will set a lot of precedent across the country, where other provinces can point to that, right? Where the industry and government have worked together and constructed something that's you know, that sets benchmarks aside for hitting certain stages, and you know, is a viable plan for reopening. So if we can achieve that even in 1 or 2 provinces, I think that's a huge win, and it will affect everybody in Canada if we're successful.
I think showing what we've done in Saskatchewan and BC, we've continued to operate through the, you know, high times right now with COVID, with it being safe. There being no breakouts. I think we've proven that, you know, the city of Winnipeg keeping their stuff open has proven that. So my opinion, it's time for us to take a little bit harder stance. A lot of these facilities have been closed for, you know, 6 months plus that we're approaching. I think the time to be super, super nice is over, and we need to lay a little bit harder line with them.
Yeah, and I can see, you know, totally understand where you're coming from, Jolene. I think the other thing, you know, with Winnipeg specifically, our demand was a seat at the table. You know, our demand wasn't that we open tomorrow. Our demand wasn't that we're seen as essential, because I don't know how that would be received by the public. Our demand was a seat at the table, and I think that's what got things going. So I think if we're going to make demands, that should be the demand. And then once we have the seat at the table, you know, where's that going to go? Because I know a number of provinces, we don't have a seat at the table versus some we do. So I think if we're crafting that release, what is our demand? Our demand should be a seat at the table. I would also ask that any drafts from the provincial councils, provincial leads, please make sure Tricia has eyeballs on it. Tricia is a wordsmithing genius and can really help craft that message for us. So.
Thanks, Scott. And I see Emily has another comment.
Can I just bring something before? Is she speaking?
Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I had a mute problem there. I agree, like Scott and Blake, I agree with your comments. You know, in Alberta, we were drafting and then we got that meeting invite, and I totally respect waiting to see what happens on Monday. But Scott, like we've said before, we've had a seat at the table, so to speak, for like 4 months, and it hasn't, like nothing's come of it. I think that's the big issue yet. Like we have it, but we're not really taking the next step, and we're not holding anybody accountable. So I would like to propose that, you know, we go into that meeting on Monday and say, okay, this is all great, but we need a plan by X. We need a launch date by X. We need a baseline, a metric by which decisions are being made by X. Because I was on this meeting yesterday, and like people are ready to just start wars. And I'm worried it will get out of control, and we're just sitting back saying nothing and being quiet rather than truly advocating for our industry.
Yep, that is the balancing act, and I agree with you. And if we find we're just being placated and strung along, then we do need to get louder. But I think we have to be careful with that messaging because it could backfire. But I'm not in disagreement at all. So.
Tricia, could I maybe just speak up and Scott, from a BC perspective, Carl and I we are lucky that we have a really good and positive relationship with the provincial government, and we're at the table with the working group working on the fitness orders and hearing them. And I do think that this is, very similar to what Dave was presenting about the landlords. This is about a relationship first, and this is a long game. As much as we feel a desperation for a short game, and please know that in BC, we know that we have much of fitness open, and we have, still aspects of fitness that are closed. Fitness being open is also, a challenge, but our thoughts are with everybody who is in provinces that are locked down and have their studios and centers that are closed. But we have built a very trusting and open relationship with the people who are making the orders in our province. And I do think that starting to put pressure on, it's so much more than just making a decision. They think about public perception. They think about, yes, the data, and we can, most provinces will absolutely agree that fitness is important, that fitness isn't just garbage, that fitness is something that is important for our physical and mental health. But there's so many steps to drive forward actually getting people open and what that process looks like. And so I do think that I know that we're anxious, and I know we're saying the time to push is now and the time to demand deadlines and asks and everything. My take on it would be that I think that's a bit counterintuitive. I think we really need to focus on a positive relationship, that we are here to help out and forge it that way. And it is a long game, and it will take longer. And it's not just about us getting reopened, but this is about really enabling the fitness industry in a future looking perspective. So I know that I'm speaking from a province where we have those relationships, but we are also therefore inside the minds of the people who are making these decisions. And it is very complex. Carl, I don't know if there's anything you want to add that I didn't say, but I'm hoping to just incite some of our experience into everybody, not to create a damper on it.
Sarah's a media hog, so she speaks most of the time in the media. I'm not a very good speaker, but what I'll say today is where I definitely agree with Sarah. Like, I'll give you an example. Our main priority right now with the FIC in BC is to reopen high intensity group fitness. And so that's most of the time what we're talking about. And they extended an order recently to February 5th where high intensity group fitness remains closed. And so we challenged them in a very positive way and said, what's preventing us from opening up high intensity group? We have it open in other provinces. We've given you guidelines that, in fairness, most high intensity group facilities in BC have already made adjustments for example, 3 meters instead of 2. What's preventing this? And we've got a real strong feeling that it's perception, right? So our churches are closed down, religious ceremonies and gatherings are closed down in BC, and high intensity group is closed down in BC. And so how could we possibly ever open up gyms before we open up churches in BC? So then it hit Sarah and I that this is a real perception thing, right? So it's not always about science, whether we want it to be or not. We have to play a sort of a game when it comes to this. And so our next move immediately after that was to connect with our provincial council and get an idea of how we can get into the press and send a positive feeling to the public. We wanted to create a layup situation. I played basketball, not very well. I use the analogy of a layup. We don't want the provincial government to have to shoot a 3-pointer in order to open up high intensity group in our province. We want it to be a simple little layup, even an alley-oop if you're tall enough to dunk. And so we thought the best way to do that was to help the province public health help us, and back and forth. And so what we did is we got media on site at one of our locations, and we pushed that message out last week. We got the message out that fitness is open, fitness is safe. We've had millions of check-ins, healthy, non-transmitted check-ins throughout the province. We're healthy, we're safe, come on out. And we had some semi-famous people talking about it as well, but we didn't do that necessarily to help the businesses today. Certainly it will help the businesses today that are open, but it's the long-term game of, okay, is public perception the reason gyms aren't open? You guys created it, public health. Thanks very much for the November from hell in British Columbia. We're actually going to be the ones that are going to fix it for you. So all through January, we are going to pump a message in BC that fitness is open and safe, even though some aspects aren't open, so that come February 5th, you have no reason other than case counts going to 1,200 a day in BC to not open high intensity group. So not all of that works in all of your provinces, but that's the strategy that Sarah and I have been using in our coalition in BC. Get in front of them, which I know you guys are, it's not all easy for you. Some of you guys have no voice right now and you're fighting for that. I agree with Scott. Fight for the voice, but have a real strong strategy and understand why are you not open today and how can you help them open you guys up? I don't know if that makes any sense.
I mean, it's very well said, very well spoken.
One of the things here in Manitoba that we haven't really talked about is there's a Safe at Home Manitoba grant program where they rolled out millions of dollars to support some businesses in order to provide free content. This is taxpayer funded exercise programs that are advertised all over the internet right now, but they have moderate to low engagement. So one of the concerns that was brought to me yesterday after some of my meetings and some of my interviews was that they're unlikely to open us just because they don't want that program to seem like a waste, because it was just rolled out in the last couple of weeks and it's millions of dollars. So that's just something I brought up that somebody had contacted me yesterday about. I'm not sure how relevant that is, but yeah, just a thought.
I would ask them if they were concerned about that funding, have them spin it to the facilities and maybe provide some low-income people or those with less access to the facilities. They can convert it to gym memberships and pump it back into the facilities still.
I think yeah, we're now 2 minutes over. What I think that to do here is in your next provincial council meeting, you get every province is different on the spectrum. So what do you think that key message is? You know, draft that release, get Trisha's eyeballs on it, get my eyeballs on it. Be happy to give feedback. I think the messaging should be that seat at the table versus we demand to open tomorrow. That's my opinion on the matter, but talk to your provincial council and start to draft, you know, what that looks like and send it through for feedback. And I think each province is a little bit different, but that should be our takeaway from this point. Trisha, anything else to add?
I think that wraps it up really well. And again, always nice to hear from BC and have a little bit of positive news. And Dr. Bonnie Henry stating that gyms are safe is a big win, and making sure that that's something that we can spread the message for across the provinces. So like Scott said, let's try and get some messaging out there. I'll ask everyone to whoever's on provincial councils to send me some messaging and we can craft it from there a little bit more and connect with each other so that we have a bit of a unity going forward. So thank you everyone for joining our call today, and we will connect again over email and see you all again in a couple weeks.
Great, thank you.
And we'll do a little thank you. Bye everyone.